on circular economy in Africa. I want to thank our many panelists who are here with us today, and I will introduce them to you in a few moments. Just to start, just to remind you, there is an interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. You can choose between French or English for translation. We will have both English speakers and French speakers today. You can also use the chat box if you want to ask any questions, if you want to introduce yourselves or interact. This session will be recorded and will be made available in a few days on our website. If you missed anything, you can watch it later. I'm going to introduce Climate Change, which is a platform of non-state actors committed to fight against climate change. Climate change has been existing since 2015. It was created before the COP21 in order to mobilize various actors, stakeholders in local authorities over the issues of climate change. We are running several activities. We do have a website where you will find a lot of information about the best practices, about research regarding fighting against climate change, both in French and English. We also have an observatory that publishes on a yearly basis some analysis and reports on action plan in the world to show what's working, what's not working, how it is all funded. These are all thorough reports and analysis which can serve as guides for both local authorities, NGOs, organizations, etc. We also have another part which is mobilizing our network and our community. We used to organize an annual summit and to mobilize various coalitions in the past. Unfortunately, this year, because of the particular context, we decided not to organize a summit, but to continue mobilizing our community, and especially this coalition, via various virtual workshops, which is why we're here together today. This workshop is the one on circular economy. This is a fairly recent coalition and has not yet been able to produce any practical or concrete responses. We've had our first meeting only a year ago during the Accra Summit of Climate Change, and we had several stakeholders around the table, ICLEA Africa, who is here with us today, and also ASEN with Johanna, who is here today. And therefore, we're trying to build this coalition and gather different stakeholders from the organization background and startups to try to move forward with this issue of circular economy in Africa. The purpose today is to gather these various stakeholders again and to try to come up with some roadmaps, at least some headlines for a roadmap in this area. As you know, the situation in Africa, we are dealing with a growing demography and a growing urbanization. Between the 1960s and the year 2050, the rate of urbanization is going to explode, plus 15% in the 1960s to plus 60% in the year 2050. There is a huge challenge at stake in terms of urbanization, which of course goes side by side with the circular economy. Many cities in Africa are quite unique in their realities of circular economy with formal and informal models. Therefore, what is at stake, in a sense, is even more fascinating or interesting. We know that more of half of the growth of world demography by 2050 will take place on the African continent. We believe this is key to explore the various possible developments and the ways of developments for Africa while fighting against climate change and the Paris agreements. On the basis of the Paris Agreement, as world community, of course, we are facing huge challenges regarding the management of waste management. I'm not teaching you anything there. As you know, many Asian countries have started closing down their borders to foreign waste. And China, there are still tons of waste that are being poured down on the African continent. The Accra summit showed us this, revealed this to us, and Accra has in its city center an open waste ground with electronic waste, mainly coming from around the world and mainly from Europe. So these are the challenges. This is a context. I'm not going to speak for more, but I'm going to give the floor to our specialists who are here with us today. I'm going to ask them a few questions, and they will tell us about their projects, and then we will keep some time at the end for a time of Q&A and have some interaction. If you have any question, therefore, you will need to just raise your hand by clicking on the icon of the hand, so we know that you want to ask a question. I will first ask a question to Paul Curry, who is the manager of Urban Systems Unit for ICLEA Africa. He was with us in Accra last year. Paul,
I'm just going to ask you the questions in English. We know that ICLEA Africa has been working a lot on this circular economy issue with a lot of activities lately within your network of cities in Africa, and you have identified the principles that are regenerate, substitute, virtualize, and restore. So I would like you to talk a bit more about this and about the role of local governments in a circular development and how local leaders in Africa can work at their level to progress towards the circular economy.
Thank you, Romain. And it's a pleasure to be here with many familiar faces and many new. So a pleasure to meet you. My name is Paul, as Romain said. I'm the manager of the Urban Systems Unit at ICLEI. We support local governments to understand many sustainability priorities, as well as support them with policy development and project development. So our urban systems team is very much interested in the potential of circular economy as a systems tool. But our big challenge, of course, is local government and public administration is often very siloed. So how do we support cities to see across departments and find opportunities to interact? So I think in framing the importance of local government, we need to think about cities and local governments as the interface between the citizens and communities and government. And so they play a really important role both as implementers and for creating environments in cities which can allow other actors to drive circular economy. So maybe I'm jumping to a future thought. I think an incredibly important role of cities is to create a space in which private sector innovation can thrive, because that's where a lot of the flexibility and the adaptability can emerge. In Africa, as we know, we need to focus on people-centered development. We can't just focus on material efficiency. At the moment, based on our data, we look very efficient, but actually this is deficiency. We don't have the quality of life necessary for our citizens. We need to improve livelihoods. We need to allow more people to participate fully in the economy. And often our data collection processes ignore or overlook informal systems because we can't measure them. And so in a way suggest that they don't exist. So one of our big advocacy roles as local government is to demonstrate the validity and importance of the informal economy and help them to think about how to legitimize it in their policy, as well as how to develop enabling policies. I wrote a list which I've kind of deviated from, but our main steps as local government: acknowledge what is going on that isn't under the banner of circular economy. There are many types of programs that don't have that banner for climate or green economy. We need to develop policy positions which make linear systems expensive. We need to continue service provision to improve quality of life, and we must do so in environmentally restorative manners, in resource productive manners. And then finally, we need to partner. And the role of intermediaries such as ICLEI, many actors, NGOs, private sector organizations in cities is very important to acknowledge. So local governments need to partner.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's the role of local governments is clear as a key player to put together all the stakeholders around the table on that issue. And so this gives me the opportunity to ask you more precisely than now that you gave the big issues. Maybe do you have some examples of cities, members of ICLEI Africa or not actually, that are doing well or that have interesting projects within the circular economy sector, which could be inspiring for our participants?
Thanks. So I might be betraying my central cause, which is local government, but our perception is that the people leading circular economy are private sector. However, there are lots under that banner, so the banner of circular economy. However, there are lots of types of projects and programs which support circular economy. So regeneration, there's a lot of work on re-embedding nature into our cities. There is a lot of work on waste management processes, and particularly the connection between waste and nature. About 60% of municipal waste in most African cities is organic, which is one of the key opportunities. So if I can cite a project in Lilongwe in Malawi, there's been a project to invest in composting at marketplaces to support the vendors to run those composting processes so that the food and food related wastes don't end up in the neighboring river and cause flooding. And similarly, cities around our network have voiced interest in the connection between organic wastes and the development of urban farming processes and making that circular link. However, our advocacy is also trying to drive or help cities move away from waste and recycling as the main view of circularity. So really thinking about regeneration, but also looking at the promise of food systems to drive shifts. So in Dodoma, the capital of Tanzania, there's some really interesting projects looking at foodways and developing public space which have productive areas to address both food insecurity, but also to demarcate natural space as having value. Cape Town is focusing on industrial symbiosis, has some really great experience with that, whereby different industries outputs can feed into as inputs for other industries in industrial parks. And I think we're seeing that emerge in a number of cities, excuse me. Nairobi, I know Kigali are exploring those. And I think when it comes to cities taking a stand, many are starting to voice circular economy as a priority. So the ones that are leading the way in terms of articulating a policy position definitely include Accra, whose national government has articulated strong points for it. Rabat in Morocco has voiced a strong interest in this, and Cape Town, indeed, where we're based, is looking to develop a circular economy action plan. So those are a few ideas.
Okay, Thanks. And maybe maybe one more question that is that I'm asking myself actually. Have you been with the strong and fast development of urban centers in Africa? Have you seen also the evolution of, because you have been talking about a lot about of waste and what kind of waste is generated. Do you see any evolution of the kind of waste which is being generated in those growing cities in the last years?
There was a really interesting session a while ago on the 1.5 degree lifestyles approach, which is a climate perspective, but it's connecting to circular economy. And my remark in the session was, we're not really engaging with our current generation or our current practices when we think of sustainability. If we want to look at how to develop our cities, we have to think about future aspirations. So how are we shaping the aspirations of the growing middle class? And I think the really important levers there are how we're advertising. You know, who is on the billboards in Accra? You know, it's pastors, it's religious communities, it's pop stars. The alcohol industry, you know, in Uganda are driving the messaging about what is a successful life. So when they start joining on to drive social messaging, for example, in Uganda, Nile Beer has started a no excuse campaign for domestic violence. You know, how are cities partnering with the influencers to promote what we then call sort of a low carbon affluence, where public transport is sexy, when the private vehicle is, you know, an anchor. And we still have a long way to go with that, because we in the continent want those aspirations. We want the so-called American dream. We want what is usually a high consumption lifestyle. So we need more examples to demonstrate how that, how we can have a low impact but high quality of life lifestyle.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's very interesting and should be explored definitely. So let me now go to the next speaker, who is Joanna Bingham. Joanna works for the ASEAN Africa, so it's the African Circular Economy Network, and was also working with us last year and with Paul. Joanna, maybe just to start, I would like to ask you, and so everybody knows better, what is exactly ASEAN doing? What is the mission and the role of ASEAN in Africa?
Great, thank you so much for having me. So ASEAN is a network of circular economy practitioners from across the continent. And so I don't have the exact figures at my fingertips right now, but it's, I'll pull them up by the end of the conversation, so I'll put them in the chat for you, about the number of countries and the number of members at present. And the idea is to connect practitioners from across the continent so that they can learn and support one another to progress the transition to a circular economy. ASEAN has several activities underway at the moment, and one of the main ones that they are developing is a conference next, which has now been pushed back due to the current situation, to 2022. And in advance of that, next year, there'll be a series of regional workshops to help to drive the agenda. So that's the main conversation around ASEAN. So ASEAN is a nonprofit and it's member-led.
Okay, and how many members do you have, and which it's all over the...
It's all over. It's very, very broad, but I should have the exact numbers, but I'll put them into the chat after so that you've got them.
Okay, good. And so in your point of view, what are the main opportunities that you've identified as a network of diverse stakeholders in developing the circular economy sector in Africa?
So I wear two hats in this conversation. I run an organization called Footprints Africa, which is predominantly based in Ghana. And we are collaborating with ASEAN, which is the other hat that I'm wearing today, to develop a case study database of examples of circular economy initiatives from across the continent. So we've been having some absolutely fascinating conversations over the last few months both with entrepreneurs, but also with African thinkers. One of the things that's really, really important and one of the main opportunities that I want to talk about is of self-determination. This is an opportunity for Africa to do development differently in a way that makes sense for the continent, and not to have people like me telling people on the continent how they should be developing, and not following the model which is clearly broken of countries which are so-called developed around the world. So I think there's a really exciting opportunity to put social and environmental concerns at the center, and to use it as an opportunity to uplift huge numbers of people, both out of poverty, but also into lives of well-being. And I think that's something that we should also be talking about. I think Paul's spoken very, very articulately about a number of the opportunities. He mentioned waste and moving the conversation away from waste beyond a conversation about recycling and waste. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. And I also think, as I said before, learning from the mistakes of those who industrialized first or are further ahead in industrialization, and using the second mover advantage there is a phenomenal opportunity. And doing it with the specific context in mind of culture and people's skills, of availability of resources, I think is a huge opportunity. More specifically, I was thinking about this when you asked the question about the change in waste. For me, one of the hugest opportunities is soil. So if you take an example of a city like Accra, 65% of municipal waste is organic waste. This is ending up in already choked landfills, which is a huge burden on municipalities. It's also creating massive issues of disease when it's not managed properly, which is frequently, but it's a resource. And we are looking at a situation of hugely degrading soils, which is a massive risk to some of the most vulnerable smallholder farmers, for example, whereas we have this amazing resource close at hand. So I think soil is one of the most, and Paul mentioned regenerative food systems and regenerating soil. I think that's one of the most enormous opportunities for us to focus on in this. But
Okay,
also one thing to add, sorry, so we talked about infrastructure. 60% of infrastructure needs to be built still by 2050. And so there's a massive opportunity to, as I was saying before, embed social and environmental concerns at the center of those constructions. So thinking about transportation systems, as Paul mentioned, and areas like that.
Okay, and since you know better Accra, sorry, I keep struggling to pronounce the name of that place where with the electronic waste.
Agbogbloshie.
Yes, thank you. Do you have? I mean, it's been a long time now that we were in Accra together. What are is there any update, any improvement on that situation, or what is being done there?
I'm not close enough. I know there's a large GIZ project. There's been several high-profile projects over time. There's a large GIZ project which is looking to work with the informal sector. And I think a lot of historic development projects have looked at the informal sector and seen them as an issue rather than seeing them as an opportunity. And the GIZ project, from what I know of it, is looking to work with the informal sector to enhance the trade of materials and products, and create more income opportunities, and also softly regulate so that issues of safety, for example, are being better managed, because obviously there's huge challenges. There was a study released last year showing that eggs from chickens, which are freely running around an e-waste dump, have something like 100 times the amount of toxins that the human body should consume, and they're being sold in the market, and there's food markets nearby. So addressing some of the issues of safety whilst also maintaining some of the benefits that informality brings in terms of the resourcefulness, in terms of the flexibility, in terms of the entrepreneurial spirit. So that's what I know of that project so far. I haven't had an update recently, so we'd have to speak to them to find out a bit more.
Thanks. And maybe because Paul was mentioning the very important role of the business sector in circular economy, you as the ASIN with these kinds of actors and members in your network, What is your opinion on that, on their role, and what role should they play, and how is the articulation in the end with the local authorities and the NGOs?
Yeah, so I think for huge scale transition, policy is required, but in the meantime, activities can start happening on the ground that can inform policy, and they already are. As Paul mentioned, there's plenty of things, particularly those that are not necessarily calling themselves circular economy. One of the well, an example to give, which is well thrashed out, but if you think about something like mobile money and the role that that's played in democratizing money effectively for those who are not able to have access to it, and regulation had to follow that. So there was innovation in collaboration with NGOs and the business sector, because it was largely funded by development financing to get it tested. So that's the role I see, a strong collaboration between NGOs and the private sector, for the NGOs to provide really flexible capital for risk-taking innovation to happen, that the private sector can then test with a lower risk and iterate and pilot and be able to adapt and change, in order to inform the policymakers so that they can make decisions and fact-based, evidence-based policies based on the results of some of these tests that are happening. I think a few things need to
I don't know if it's on my side or on Joanna's side that the connection is a bit
also in my
breaking.
side.
Is that better?
Network is on and off.
Sorry. Where
Yeah,
did you lose me? Did you get anything of what I just said?
Not really. It's been like 30 seconds that we lost.
Okay, let me start from the beginning. So I was mentioning the I'll start from the scratch, and what you got, we'll see where we go. So I was talking about there's a well thrashed out case of mobile money, and that is an example where innovation on the business side influenced policy, which then had to play catch up, and that innovation was funded by development funding. And so the role I see of businesses and NGOs is for NGOs to provide that risk capital so that businesses can go and pilot and innovate and test out different approaches. And I very deliberately use the word risk capital from the part of NGOs because there are a number of unknowns, and this is a new way of operating. So thinking about partnerships and collaborations across whole value chains, which rather than competition, which is a new approach. And so building those partnerships, trying different models, understanding the best way of collaborating together and what the governance structures need to look like. These are some of the things that need to happen and need to be tested in various different pilots. It also requires information sharing, and sometimes there's, what we're doing at the moment with our case study database is collecting different cases, and some of the things we're seeing is just entrepreneurs and those trying out these models really struggling to get the information they need. So much better transparency is required. And I think businesses can play a role in leading the way on that. I think particularly larger business and some of the multinationals, they can start to share some of their data more. So whether at a basic level, looking at things like waste volumes, which can create huge opportunities if there's more transparency around the materials that are available, is a small example. There are a couple of things that need to be in place in order for this kind of piloting and then scaling and then building into policy to work more effectively. One of those is to take much longer time horizons. And at the moment we've got a kind of a greedy financial sector that requires returns yesterday, and we need to rethink the financing models in order to take into account of the different needs of this transition. We also really need to rethink what we're measuring, and I think that's a really critical point. So we had a conversation recently with an architect in Rwanda, Christian Benimana, and he was talking about the desire for governments to add GDP points And so maybe with their infrastructure projects, they're thinking about big infrastructure projects that are going to add GDP points, but maybe are leaving behind and excluding some of those who need those infrastructure projects the most. And so instead of thinking about things like GDP, if we're thinking of more human-centered metrics and more, so rather than focusing on money, we're also thinking about social environmental well-being, all of these different aspects, and building in much more holistic metrics that can more accurately reflect the development of countries, cities, businesses, whatever that happens to be. So
okay,
those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you for your contribution. Very, I hope the translator could follow you. You speak quite fast, but you gave a
Sorry, I know you said at the beginning to speak slowly.
lot.
I can try encore en français.
We are recording because it was full of interesting ideas and inputs about transparency, about data, also what to measure, which is something Paul was mentioning also. So yeah, thank you so much for these valuable inputs. It's been already half an hour that we are together. So let me give the floor to Ladislas from RALGA. He's the Secretary General of RALGA, which is the Association of Local Governments of Rwanda. Thank you so much, Ladislas, for being with us. So yeah, we wanted to know about, we know that Rwanda is doing a lot, and especially Kigali and in this sector and other sectors also, fighting against climate change in general. So very interesting things are coming out in Rwanda. So could you give us an overview of what RALGA has been doing and what's the role of local governments and you as an association of local governments, in particular in this sector of circular economy? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romain, and thank you also to the participants to this webinar. It is very important to discuss this topic, which is very critical, at least within the context of sustainable development goals, because we cannot achieve the sustainable development unless we really understand this concept of circular economy, which is very, very important. The Rwanda Association of Local Government Authorities, as well as the local government authorities in Rwanda, we are operating within the decentralization policy framework, whereby the government is responsible for policy formulation, legislation, resources mobilization, capacity building, and monitoring and evaluation. This aspect of capacity building has two components. We have the hard part of it, which is about infrastructure, and you have also the soft part of it, which is about technical assistance and skills. So RALGA also plays this role of capacity building in terms of the soft aspect of it. And then local government have the responsibility for implementation of government programs. Those two layers of administration are complementary to each other, whereby the central government defines the policies and the local government ensures implementation. So at the local level, there is where we reconcile exactly or practically. That is where the theory and the practice get reconciled, where the policy and the implementation are translated into impact. So circular economy in local government is about this impact, and it is about achieving tangible results to fit into the policy target. And the local government in Rwanda, in the perspective of circular economy, you have three layers or three steps you have to go through. The first step is about collection and transportation, whereby each household within the cities, mainly within the cities, because in rural areas they have private, what I could call private landfills. But in the city, we have a very big landfill. So each city now has its specific landfill, but the state of Kigali has 3 landfills. So this element of collection and transportation is very, very important. Second is about recycling. And then the third element is about landfill management. And Rwanda, to achieve this, at least the local government authorities in Rwanda, to achieve this, they go through the PPP framework. that is the public-private partnership. That means the government defines policies, local governments are responsible for implementation, they develop infrastructure, and they contract or subcontract private operators to manage the landfill and the collection and the transportation of waste, and they ensure also the recycling of the waste. And at this level, that is where RIGA comes in as the Association of Local Government Authorities, because the terms of reference preparation is very, very important, and this requires too much skills. And within the framework of capacity building, where RIGA plays a very big role for local government, but also the context of local economic development, which is also very, very important. These two layers, that is where RIGA plays its role. For the soft part, not only we provide the trainings and the skills, but also we organize study tours. Normally, at least every 2 years, we organize study tours in the Western countries, mainly in Germany, because we have the partnership with the JSTB, that is the Association of Towns and Municipalities in the Rhineland-Palatinate. At least every 2 years, we organize study visits there. Last year in 2019, we organized a study visit in the Netherlands because we have a partnership with VNG, and we organized a study tour for local authorities from secondary cities for a study tour to see how the waste is managed, so that we can really understand the concept of circular economy. Circular economy in Rwanda, not only it is about waste, but it is also about plastic, it is about metals, and it is about organic. Organic are recycled, and they are transformed or recycled into the materials or the materials that are used in agriculture. Now metals, they are recycled into construction materials, or somehow even computers now are getting recycled, but also papers, they are used papers are recycled into toilet papers or other papers to be used in the office. So nothing is lost in Rwanda actually. Everything gets recycled in a way or another, so that you have a circular economy in that way. And the role of RIGA is to ensure the capacity building for local authorities in terms of the public-private partnership, and this is very important in our strategic plan as well. But also we provide some studies which we conduct on behalf of the local authorities to show them where the potentiality can be in terms of circular economy. Because, for example, if the city of Kigali, we have now around 2 million people who reside in the city, but in secondary cities, you have about 400 or 300,000 people. And the opportunities for circular economy are not the same. So we try to localize the potentialities, and we try to localize capacity building to respond to localized needs and localized opportunities. So that is where RIGA comes in. That is what we have been doing. This morning, I was in a meeting with the city of Kigali about the landfill management, because this is very, very important as the city is growing, and we have a new master plan. So we have to develop new landfills which are responding to the growing population. Also, we, as I mentioned, besides the partnership with the VNG and the JSTB from Rhineland-Palatinate, we also conducted a study visit in Rhineland-Palatinate because they have a very good landfill in Mayen, and we went there in the beginning of 2019 as well to see how the waste is managed and circularly transformed, whereby some of the waste is transformed into potable water. So not only about recycling them to transform them into used materials, but at that landfill we saw that they can even process it into potable water. And this shall be also another technology, another approach to develop as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I wanted maybe to, thank you for this very clear point. You talked a lot about the PPPs. I wanted to ask you maybe something a bit different. Is there, because the best waste is the one you do not produce actually. So is there any, in Rwanda, for example, and in Kigali, any kind of awareness raising campaigns to the public about this, about waste and how to decrease the amount of waste, because Kigali is impressively clean and well maintained. So I wonder if there is also a direct awareness activity towards the population.
That is the case, and that is why Kigali is performing and is actually transforming in a sustainable way, because now using the concept of smart city, that is sustainable mobility and rapid transport. This aspect of circular economy is the keyword there, and part of the implementation, because I said the government is responsible for policy formulation and the local government are responsible for implementation, and we complement each other. We have the Rwanda Environment Management Authority, which is there as the regulator, and then we as the local government, we have different initiatives. Besides this public-private partnership in terms of waste management, we have awareness campaigns which are regularly conducted through media, through public gatherings, but even through awareness and banners and flyers which are posted in different places, and short messages which are sent through mobile phones. But we organize particular campaigns, particularly we as the Rwanda Association of Local Government Authorities. At least every year we organize 2 campaigns around my city. In Kinyarwanda, we call it Umuji wanje, but we call it in English, my city. How to make sure that my city is sustainable and that makes my city clean, my city wealthy, and how to make a sustainable city, make it popular, pro-poor, but clean. Because sometimes people think that poor people are dirty and rich people are clean. Actually, that is not there is no equation on that. We can have poor people in a clean city, not only having a clean city with only rich people. So for us, we ensure that this My City campaigns is pro-poor, but in a sustainable manner. That is the element of inclusiveness. So this campaign, we conduct it annually, and also, unfortunately, this year we had this COVID-19 pandemic, which paralyzed most of our operations. But next year, we have planned for this activity, which shall be conducted across the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ladislas. Now we wanted just to bring a kind of open this discussion to another sector, another subsector. Let's say we have been talking about a lot of about organic waste, plastic waste, but we wanted also to approach the topic of water, water management. Et je vais passer en français. C'est pour cela que nous avons invité.
Okay, I'm going to be speaking French now. So now we've asked one of our speakers, who is Serge Miquel, the director of La Goutte d'eau, the drop of water. Could you explain to us what you do, what the drop of water does, and what has been your experience concerning the reuse of treated used waters, especially in North Africa, in Tunisia mainly, where you have your own projects and activities? Thank you very much. Thank you for your invitation. I'm the president of La Goutte d'eau, the drop of water, which is a small association near Montpellier in the south of France. Our association is to help cooperation with local authorities to support initiatives and bring societal and other expertise. We work in the water sector in what we call the management of water. And our areas of expertise are water, but also biodiversity. We facilitate international networks regarding water management and water from lagoons in France. Coming back to our topics, which is circular economy, the area of water is an important element of circular economy. It's a natural resource which could be abundant in some cases, but unfortunately it is not so much a case anymore because needs are growing, pollution is growing, and the climate change context does not help in this. Therefore, one of our objectives is to reduce the impact on the evolution of this situation, but to be more efficient in the way we use water and our water resources. For that purpose, as we try to save water and we try to reuse used waters, treated waters, to improve circular economy. This is a key element. And that would generate 3 economic values, for example, additional resources if we use a better quality water in a better way. If you want to use your water better, you can share it more evenly between the populations. And also another environmental asset by protecting the resource and linking it to biodiversity. With water in the circular economy, you can develop a positive value. This is our framework. On the basis of this principle, we've been working in Tunisia, in Ajim. Just to give you an idea, on the one hand, you have hotels, 4 or 5 stars hotels, which are using the water, desalted water from the continent. And on the other hand, you have a poor rural world without any resources, which is the case of this small city. So the opportunity arose because these people had a small plant, and we were trying to develop circular economy and adapt to climate change and to reuse the used waters and treat them to give it to the rural sector and add an added value for the rural sector. It's a generous and good idea, but of course we are facing some difficulties, which I'm sure could be a lesson for your group. When we talk about reusing treated used waters, it's actually a very complex topic in France and in the rest of the world, even though Tunisia is way ahead of this. In this topic, we are aware of all these difficulties, yet we have decided to say, even though it's interesting, even though there are some options that are interested, we cannot launch such a project by calling it from the start on the basis of technical principles. So we decided to go for a study, first of all, the research of feasibility, to make sure we are aware of all the economical, societal, technical aspects, to know whether we can share this viewpoint with the local farmers. So this is absolutely key, that we should do this, first of all, this feasibility study with the help of public funding to make sure we go in the right direction. This great idea is not actually shared by everyone. Maybe for the last 2 years or so, we've been trying to mobilize French funding to convince local authorities to join this cooperation. Public power authorities are quite shy when it comes to this. The elected members usually prefer to cut ribbons rather than join studies. But from our point of view, we cannot engage public funding finances as long as this feasibility market research has been done, and that we get the agreement and the approval of all the stakeholders in Tunisia, the government, the rural powers, authorities, etc., to make sure this would be a successful project and that it would be a successful plant. this is the challenge which we are facing in this area of Tunisia. Thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony. Yeah, the importance of research, feasibility study as a network of local stakeholders. This is something that we need to insist on. We have lost Roma. Yes. We cannot hear. We cannot hear Roma. Okay, that's good.
Du coup, ça s'est arrêté où? Pardon.
Acteurs des territoires.
Ok. Bon, c'était juste pour dire que oui, effectivement, c'est.
Okay, what I was saying, this is more of an advocacy approach that we can do as a non-state actor, and underlying the importance of doing research. We need to do preliminary research to create a favorable environment to make sure that such water treatment plants or such projects could be carried out. Indeed, we understand the position of elected members, but even the development banks, etc., need to make the effort. We have 8 minutes left. So I think we will now take time for the questions to the Q&A. Thank you to all of our speakers for their presentations. If you have any projects, if you have some projects regarding circular economy, we do have a mapping on our website, which you can use to share your project. And later on, we can publish this translated into French or English and put it on our mapping for action plan. So please visit our website. Okay, let's look at the questions now. The chat box was very busy. I could not follow all the messages. I don't know if Eva or Tanya, my colleagues, could you help me? Maybe did you see any question there? Or we could ask our participants to ask a live question.
Oui, si on prenait la question qu'on avait eue même en avance.
Yes, maybe we can even talk about the question which we had beforehand.
Alors, c'était. Il faut que je la retrouve. Ah oui, comment entreprendre?
Okay, how do we go about waste management without being in competition with other local actors? Okay, where was the question? Yeah, how do we go about optimizing waste management without being in competition with other local actors? So Joanna, and you speak French, so go ahead. Yeah, how do we upgrade? How do we manage waste recycling? How could it go in competition and maybe take away a resource that would be useful for local actors? Is there a risk? Is there a possible risk or not? Or it's only on the side? In competition with whom? If we start to formalize a sector, could it be in competition with other, maybe more informal and more fragile local actors?
I'd love to try in French, but I think you probably wouldn't love me to. They both have to exist together. So the informal sector play an incredible role reaching last mile areas that the formal economy just can't reach. So small communities where maybe there aren't formal roads that trucks can fit down. So they play that last mile role there, and they also play a huge role on landfill sites. I think the the formal economy needs the informal sector right now. I think what we need to get to is a situation where the informal sector has the same protection as the formal sector. I read a paper recently that questioned whether the role of the informal sector was, because ultimately the role of the informal sector is so critical because of the financial structure. So they don't pay taxes, they don't have heavy overheads, they're able to collect the materials more cheaply than the formal sector are able to. One of the arguments was that this keeps the price of recycled materials artificially low. So a challenge for the formal sector as they formalize and they have more social securities, which is critical, and more health and safety in place, which are critical because these are incredibly vulnerable people. That can have an impact on the competitiveness of recycled materials with virgin materials. So I think that's where more of the concern is, rather than formal and informal competing, because they can collaborate together very, very well.
Yeah, thank you.
Est-ce que je peux ajouter quelque chose?
Bien sûr, je vous en prie.
Can I say something else? Okay, thank you very much. I think the question was regarding the competition between the formal and the informal sector regarding waste management. If I talk from our own experience in Rwanda, I can see that the reality is that both complement each other and are not in competition as such. We have an urban context which attracts a lot of investments with our huge projects, and waste recycling requires a lot of investment. We've seen organic recycling, for example, and this has been done mainly by the informal sector. They take organic waste and make compost and transform it into organic smoke. So I think waste recycling does not necessarily is not maybe a good example. I think it's something that needs to be multidimensional and needs to be relocalized. Otherwise, the waste recycling could lead to a social and economic conflict, and we need to be careful if we want to manage this in the long term. Thank you. Another bilingual speaker, that's wonderful. We're coming to the end. We have a hand raised from Modeste.
Moi, je vois pas, mais est-ce qu'on peut ouvrir le micro de Modeste?
Oui. Normalement. Si Modeste veut poser sa question.
Can Modeste ask a question, please?
Bonsoir. Vous me recevez?
His question.
Vous me recevez?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Bonsoir tout le monde.
Hello, everyone.
Moi, c'est Modeste Aoku. Je suis marin navigateur.
I'm a sailor, fisherman, or sailor rather, and president of an association in Togo of salesmen.
Dans un premier temps, pour nos activités professionnelles.
We are here to defend our activities, and we are also fighting against pollution. It is not a question as such. I just want to make maybe a comment. I want to thank the organizers of this conference so that we can talk and share about these issues. And I want to ask if we could have some of these partners to help us in the transformation of our waste in Togo. Unfortunately, our sailors have committed to doing this and fight against pollution. we had to set up a brigade, protection brigade for this purpose.
Notre objectif en réalité est de lutter contre la pollution marine.
And we want to fight against maritime pollution,
Aussi créer de l'emploi.
but we also want to develop employment, make employment.
Comment redonner
How
autre vie
can
à
we
nos déchets recyclés?
recycle waste and transform our waste? We are looking for partners in order to help us do this. People who will be professionals in recycling, in waste recycling, water waste. We've not had any funding, any support from anyone, but this is one of our goal as seamen, is to fight against pollution and protect our sector of activity. So I would like to know if it would be possible. I think someone who has an organization in Ghana, which is next to us in Togo, could they help us in a partnership to transform and recycle our plastic waste and give second life to the waste and help us move forward? Yes, I can see the difficulty. I can see the difficulty. Oui, oui.
On t'attend.
Ok. Modeste, on peut se parler par email.
We can talk via email.
Ok, je vous écrirai. On connaît, on a des.
I will write to you. We do know of various people that we are working with in Togo who could maybe help you get in touch with another network, and we will come back to you after this session. A very last and short question from someone. Youssef, I think, raise your hand. Okay, Jibrila, I'm from Cameroon. My question is regarding recycling or the reuse of used waters with hand washing. We've seen a lot of devices being set up. I want to know, I'd like to know, how can we treat these waters, these used waters, with the washing of hands that we've had a lot lately? Thank you, Jibrila. That's a good question. I don't know if anyone can, maybe Serge could add to this. I don't know what to say about this. Mike. Is Mike? It's an interesting question. Washing of hands, the water should go to a water treatment plant. So this water joins all the other used waters. There's nothing special about it. From what I can see, from what I know, if this is the technical structure, then I don't see any problem in this. If this water, just like any other waters, is being sent to the plant, it's just like any other waters. I don't see if there are microbes and if there are germs or whatever, they will be treated just like the others. Was that the question? I think it's probably connected to the COVID situation. In Europe, of course, it's a similar thing, but in Europe, the presence of COVID was detected in some used waters, especially. Maybe that's why. So these waters are being treated with more complex treatments, antibacterial treatments, etc., that can kill all germs. So depending on the level of recycling that you want to have. I think we're going to have to stop for now.
Je vais vous remercier tous. Peut-être vous demander si vous êtes d'accord d'allumer vos caméras pour une petite photo finale.
Maybe if you don't mind,
De notre premier round. Et
you can all turn on your video so we can take a picture of all of us. And this is the last of our series of virtual workshops. We will start again in January. We could have a joint picture of all of us. If you can turn on your cameras. Beautiful, wonderful to see all your beautiful faces. Thank you, everyone. Continue to follow. I think these workshops, I think there's about 100 of us. Thank you for joining us, for your presentations. Thank you to our speakers. Continue to follow us, and we will keep in touch and let you know what's happening next. And we will get in touch with those of you who ask for more information. You have a nice day, and thank you and goodbye for now.
Merci.
Merci, au revoir.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Merci, au revoir. Thank you.
Merci, au revoir.
Au revoir.
Thank you, goodbye.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci, au revoir à tous. À
Au
bientôt.
revoir. Au revoir.
Merci.
Au revoir et merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Au revoir.
Super, merci.